Everyone whispered that Arthur Taylor was a monster who destroyed careers for sport. Terrified veteran servers refused Table 4, sacrificing Riley, the newest waitress, to the slaughter. The staff expected a public execution that night. Instead, they witnessed a high-stakes psychological chess match, exposing a heartbreaking secret. Riley didn't just survive. She shattered the city's elite hierarchy with a single, defiant act of integrity. You think you know how this underdog story ends? You don't. This is the true story of how one brave waitress brought a ruthless billionaire to his knees with nothing more than a cup of coffee. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. That's how Riley felt looking out the back window of Le Ciel, the most pretentious French restaurant in the Pacific Northwest. She felt slick, greasy, and entirely out of place. Riley Jenkins was 23, with a degree in art history that was currently serving as a very expensive coaster for her mounting student debt. She had moved here from Boise 3 weeks ago, chasing a vague promise of a gallery internship that had evaporated the moment her bus pulled into the depot. Now, she was wearing a starched white apron that smelled faintly of bleach and fear, standing on the precipice of a Tuesday night dinner service that the veteran staff referred to simply as the Gauntlet. The kitchen was a cacophony of stainless steel and swearing. Chef Jean-Luc, a man whose blood pressure seemed to operate on a different physiological plane than the rest of the human species, was screaming about truffles. "Riley, stop staring at the rain. The rain does not pay your rent." Riley jumped, nearly dropping a tray of polished silverware. "Sorry, chef. Just checking the tables." "Check your head," Jean-Luc barked, turning back to a pot of reducing veal stock. She scurried out to the floor. Le Ciel was beautiful, in a cold, intimidating way. Everything was velvet, mahogany, and gold leaf. It was the kind of place where a bottle of water cost more than her hourly wage. The staff lineup was at 4:30 p.m. sharp. The floor manager, a weaselly man named Richard Cole, who wore suits that were slightly too shiny, paced back and forth in front of the servers. He looked nervous. He was sweating, despite the aggressive air conditioning. "All right, listen up," Richard said, his voice tight. "We have a full book tonight. The mayor is coming in at 7 with a party of 6. Treat them well. But—" he paused, wiping his upper lip. "More importantly, Mr. Taylor is on the books for 6 p.m. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Riley looked around. The other servers, hardened veterans who could carry 5 plates on one arm and uncork a vintage Cabernet without breaking eye contact, looked terrified. Beatrice, a server who had been at Le Ciel since the Clinton administration, actually crossed herself. "Arthur Taylor?" a server named Mike whispered. "I thought he was in Geneva." "He's back," Richard said grimly, "and he requested Table 4, specifically." Riley raised her hand tentatively. "Who is Arthur Taylor?" The silence that followed was heavy. Beatrice turned to her face pale. "He's not a who, honey. He's a what." "Arthur Taylor," Richard explained, his voice trembling slightly, "is the CEO of Taylor Hale Dynamics. He owns half the real estate in this city and holds the debt on the other half. He comes here maybe twice a year, and every time he comes—" Richard trailed off. "Last time," Mike interjected, "he made Chloe cry because her shadow fell across his soup. He had her fired before dessert. 2 years ago," Beatrice added, "he bought the building across the street just to evict a barista who got his order wrong. He is a miserable, vindictive, soulless man who eats happiness for breakfast." "Okay," Riley said, trying to sound brave but feeling her stomach twist. "So he's a difficult customer. We just kill him with kindness, right?" Beatrice let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You don't kill Arthur Taylor with kindness, Riley. You just try to survive him." Richard clapped his hands, the sound startlingly loud. "Right. The issue is, none of you want to take him." The staff stepped back in unison, leaving Richard standing alone. It was almost comical, like a synchronized swimming routine of cowardice. "I can't do it, Richard," Mike said, shaking his head. I'm on thin ice as it is. If he complains, I'm done." "I have a mortgage," Beatrice said flatly. "I'm not risking it." Richard's eyes darted around the room, desperate. They landed on Riley. Riley felt the blood drain from her face. "Me? Richard, no. I've been here 3 weeks. I don't even know the wine list by heart yet." "It's perfect," Richard said, a manic glint in his eye. "You're new. He doesn't know you. You don't have a history with him. Just keep his water full. Don't speak unless spoken to, and for the love of God, do not make eye contact for longer than 2 seconds. "Richard, this is a bad idea," Beatrice warned. "She's a lamb." "She's the only one left," Richard hissed. He walked over to Riley and put a clammy hand on her shoulder. "Riley, listen to me. If you get through this service without him demanding to speak to me, I'll give you the Friday night section for a month. That's $2,000 in tips, easy." $2,000. That was rent. That was student loans. That was food that wasn't instant ramen. Riley swallowed hard. She looked at the terrified faces of her colleagues. She looked at the empty table 4, a secluded booth in the corner with the best view of the Space Needle. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." The clock struck 6 p.m. The rain hammered against the glass. The heavy oak doors swung open. The host stand went silent. Arthur Taylor did not walk. He glided, propelled by the sheer force of his own importance. He was older than Riley expected, maybe in his late 60s, with silver hair swept back immaculately. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Riley's parents' house, but it was his eyes that froze her. They were grey, flat, and completely devoid of warmth. He looked like a shark that had learned to walk on land. He was flanked by 2 younger men in suits, assistants, or maybe bodyguards, who peeled away as he approached the dining room, leaving him to enter alone. He didn't wait to be seated. He walked straight to table 4, sat down, and placed a heavy, leather-bound notebook on the table. Richard shoved Riley forward. "Go! Water! Now!" Riley grabbed the crystal pitcher. Her hands were shaking so badly the ice clinked against the glass, sounding like wind chimes in a hurricane. She took a deep breath, forced a smile onto her face, and walked toward the corner booth. "Don't look at the eyes. Don't look at the eyes." She reached the table. Taylor was staring out the window. He didn't acknowledge her presence. "Good evening, sir," Riley said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Welcome to Le Ciel." Taylor didn't move. He didn't blink. The silence stretched out, agonizing and thick. Riley began to pour the water. She focused on the stream, terrified of splashing a single drop onto the pristine white tablecloth. "Stop," Taylor said. His voice was like a gravel grinding together, low, rough, and authoritative. Riley froze, the pitcher mid-air. "Sir?" Taylor slowly turned his head. He looked at the water glass. Then he looked at her name tag. Then, finally, he looked at her face. "I didn't ask for ice," he said. Riley looked at the glass. There were 3 cubes of ice floating in it. I apologize, sir. The standard service is—" "I don't care about standard service," Taylor interrupted, his voice not rising in volume, but increasing in intensity. "I care about my service. I have been coming here for 20 years. Everyone knows I do not take ice. Did they not brief you? Or are you simply incompetent?" Riley felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. From the corner of her eye, she saw Richard hiding behind a pillar, burying his face in his hands. "I am new, Mr. Taylor," Riley said, fighting the urge to run. "I wasn't informed. I will replace this immediately." "No," Taylor said. He reached out and picked up the glass. He held it up to the light, inspecting it like a diamond. "You won't replace it," he said softly. "You will fish it out." Riley blinked. "Excuse me?" "You made the mistake," Taylor said, placing the glass back down with a sharp clack. "Fix it. Use a spoon. Use your fingers. I don't care. But remove the ice. Now." The restaurant had gone quiet. The nearby tables had stopped eating. Everyone was watching. It was a power play, pure and simple. He wanted to humiliate her. He wanted to see if she would break. Riley looked at the spoon on the table. It was silver, heavy. She looked at Taylor. He was smiling, a tiny, cruel curl of the lip. She could walk away. She could throw the water in his face and quit. She could go back to Boise. But then she remembered the rent. She remembered the gallery internship that fell through. She remembered that she had nowhere else to go. Riley took a breath. She reached for the spoon. "Actually," Riley said, pulling her hand back. Taylor's eyebrows raised. "Actually?" "Actually," Riley repeated, her voice gaining a sudden, strange strength. "I can't do that, sir." Taylor leaned back, crossing his arms. "And why is that? Is it beneath you?" "No," Riley said. "It's unsanitary. If I put a spoon in there that's been sitting on the table, or God forbid my fingers, I am contaminating your beverage. Le Ciel has health standards, Mr. Taylor, and I respect you too much to serve you contaminated water." She grabbed the glass before he could react. "I will bring you a fresh one, without ice, room temperature or chilled." Taylor stared at her. For 5 seconds, the air in the restaurant was so thin it felt impossible to breathe. Richard looked like he was about to have a stroke. Then Arthur Taylor did something that no one expected. He exhaled through his nose, a short, sharp huff. "Chilled," he said, "from the bottle. Don't open it until it's at the table." "Of course," Riley said. She turned on her heel and walked away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She made it to the service station before her knees gave out. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. Beatrice was there, filling a bread basket. She looked at Riley with wide, terrified eyes. "You talked back to him," Beatrice whispered. "You actually talked back to him." "I didn't talk back," Riley said, her voice trembling. "I quoted health code." "He's going to skin you alive," Beatrice said, shaking her head. "That wasn't a win, honey. That was just the opening move. You just made yourself a target." Riley grabbed a bottle of Pellegrino from the chiller. Her hands were cold. "Well," Riley said, forcing herself to stand up straight, "if I'm going down, I'm taking the $2,000 with me." She marched back out to the floor, but as she approached table 4, she noticed something. Taylor wasn't looking out the window anymore. He had opened his leather notebook, and on the table, next to his fork, he had placed a small, strange object. It was a timer, an old-fashioned mechanical kitchen timer, and it was ticking. Riley placed the chilled bottle of Pellegrino on the table. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she stared at the mechanical timer sitting next to Arthur Taylor's left hand. It was a brushed steel device, ticking with a rhythmic, maddening precision. Tick, tick, tick. Taylor watched her watching the timer. He didn't say a word. He simply tapped the face of his Rolex. "Is there a time limit, Mr. Taylor?" Riley asked, keeping her voice even, though her palms were sweating. "I value efficiency," Taylor replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "You have 3 minutes to present the wine list, recommend a bottle, and pour the first glass. If the timer rings before the wine is in the glass, I leave. And if I leave, I make a phone call to the owner of this building." He reached out and twisted the dial. Crack-click. The ticking grew louder. Riley didn't waste a second. She didn't run. That would show panic. But she moved with a swift, fluid urgency. She signaled Richard for the sommelier's book. Richard, looking like he was on the verge of hyperventilating, thrust the heavy leather binder into her hands. "He likes Bordeaux," Richard hissed into her ear. "Expensive Bordeaux. Just give him the 82 Latour. It's $3,000. He'll love the price tag." Riley took the book and walked back to the table. She had spent the last 3 weeks memorizing this book. Not just the prices, but the notes, the stories. She placed the book down. The timer was at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. "Mr. Taylor," she began, "the manager suggests the 82 Latour." Taylor sneered. It was an ugly expression that wrinkled his nose. "Of course he does. Richard is a predictable man who thinks money equals taste. If I wanted to drink a mortgage payment, I'd go to Wall Street." He looked at her, his grey eyes piercing. "What do you suggest? You have 2 minutes." Riley's mind raced. He hated the ice. He hated the standard. He hated predictability. He was a man who felt the world was incompetent and shallow. He didn't want the most expensive thing. He wanted the correct thing. She flipped past the Bordeaux. She flipped past the Burgundies. She went to the back of the book, to the section most servers ignored because the commission was lower. "The 2014 Chignon from the Loire Valley," Riley said firmly. The ticking seemed to slow down. Taylor stopped looking at the timer and looked at her. "Chignon? That is a peasant wine. Cabernet Franc. It's distinct, yes, but hardly refined." "It's honest," Riley countered. She remembered reading about the winemaker, an old man who refused to use modern machinery, crushing grapes by foot, even in his 80s. "It has high acidity, notes of graphite and blackberry. It's not trying to impress you with oak or price. It's bitter, it's complex, and it doesn't apologize for what it is." She held his gaze. "I think you'd appreciate something that doesn't apologize." The timer hit 1 minute. Taylor stared at her. The silence stretched, tight as a drumhead. Riley could hear Richard whimpering in the background. "Fetch it," Taylor said. Riley spun around. She practically sprinted to the cellar. She bypassed the temperature-controlled display cases and went to the dusty rack in the back. She grabbed the bottle. 45 seconds. She returned to the table. She presented the label. He nodded once. 30 seconds. She pulled the corkscrew from her apron. This was the moment of truth. If the cork broke, she was dead. If she fumbled, she was dead. She drove the worm in, twisted and pulled. A clean pop. 20 seconds. She wiped the rim. She poured a taste. Taylor swirled the dark red liquid. He sniffed it. He took a sip. Riley held her breath. The timer was at 10 seconds. 9. 8. He didn't speak. He just sat there, the wine on his tongue. "Pour," he said. Riley filled his glass just as the timer let out a sharp, metallic ding. Taylor reached out and silenced the timer. He took another sip of the wine. Then he looked at the bottle. Then at Riley. "Acceptable," he muttered. "It tastes like wet stones and anger. It suits my mood." Riley exhaled, her knees feeling like jelly. "I'll give you a moment with the menu, sir." "No," Taylor said, opening the notebook again. "I know what I want, and this is where you will likely fail." He pointed a manicured finger at the kitchen doors. "Tell Jean-Luc I want the duck confit, but tell him if he uses a cherry reduction he's been obsessed with lately, I will send it back. I want it dry, skin crisp enough to shatter, meat falling off the bone, and no garnish, no parsley, no edible flowers, no nonsense, just the duck." "Understood," Riley said. "And," Taylor added, his eyes narrowing, "reset the timer. 20 minutes. If the duck isn't here in 20 minutes, don't bother bringing it." He cranked the dial again. The ticking resumed. The kitchen was a war zone. When Riley relayed the order, Chef Jean-Luc threw a towel into a pot of boiling water. "No sauce. He wants dry duck. He is a Philistine, a barbarian," Jean-Luc screamed, his face turning a shade of purple that matched the onions he was chopping. "He wants what he wants, Chef," Riley said, checking her watch. "And we have 18 minutes. I cannot cook a confit in 18 minutes. It takes time to crisp." "Then use the salamander on high heat and watch it like a hawk," Riley said, surprising herself with her own assertiveness. "Please, Chef, he's timing us." Jean-Luc grumbled, but he moved. The kitchen staff worked in a frenzy. Riley stood at the pass, watching the clock. 15 minutes, 10 minutes. At 18 minutes, Jean-Luc plated the duck leg. It looked perfect. Golden brown, sizzling, stark naked on the white ceramic. "Service!" Jean-Luc barked. Riley grabbed the plate. She checked the rim for thumbprints. Clean. She walked out to the floor. She placed the duck in front of Taylor with 90 seconds to spare. "Duck confit, no sauce, no garnish," Riley announced. Taylor looked at the duck. He picked up his fork and knife. He tapped the skin. It made a hollow scratching sound. "Crisp," he acknowledged. He cut a piece. The meat pulled away from the bone with zero resistance. He put it in his mouth. He chewed slowly. Riley waited. This was the terrifying part. The wine was subjective. The food was objective. Taylor stopped chewing. He swallowed. Then he put his fork down with a heavy clatter. "Disgusting," he said. Riley blinked. "Sir?" "It's salty," Taylor said, pushing the plate away. "It is inedible. Jean-Luc has oversalted the cure. It tastes like I'm eating a salt lick." Riley looked at the duck. Jean-Luc was a Michelin-starred chef. He didn't oversalt things. "Mr. Taylor," Riley said cautiously, "Chef Jean-Luc is very precise with his seasoning." "Are you calling me a liar?" Taylor snapped. His voice carried across the room. Other diners looked over, whispering. "No, sir, I'm just surprised." "Don't be surprised. Be useful," Taylor hissed. He picked up the fork, stabbed the piece of duck he had cut, and held it out to her. "Eat it," he commanded. Riley recoiled slightly. I can't do that, sir. It's against protocol to eat from a guest's plate." "I am not a guest," Taylor said, his eyes wild. "I am the judge, jury, and executioner of this restaurant's reputation. If you trust the chef so much, prove it. Eat the duck." Richard was frantically making cut-it-out motions from the hallway, signaling Riley to just apologize and take the plate away. But Riley looked at Taylor's face. He wasn't just angry. He was testing her integrity. He wanted to see if she would lie to appease him, or if she would stand by the truth. Riley took a clean fork from the service tray. She cut a small piece from the other side of the duck leg. She put it in her mouth. The flavor exploded. It was rich, gamey, and fatty. But the salt was perfect. It wasn't even borderline. It was seasoned to perfection. She swallowed. "Well," Taylor challenged, "salty, isn't it? Like seawater." Riley looked him dead in the eye. This was the moment she would get fired. She knew it. You never disagree with the customer. "No, sir," Riley said clearly. "It is not salty. It is perfectly seasoned. In fact, it's one of the best things I've ever tasted." The room went silent. Richard dropped his clipboard. Taylor stared at her. His face turned red. He looked ready to flip the table. You insolent little—" "I can take it back," Riley continued, her voice trembling but firm. "I can have the chef make you a plain chicken breast if your palate is sensitive today. But I will not tell the chef he made a mistake when he didn't. That would be a lie, and I don't think you pay for lies, Mr. Taylor." Taylor gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles were white. He looked at the duck. He looked at Riley. For a long, agonizing minute, he didn't move. Then he picked up his fork again. He took another bite of the duck. He chewed. He swallowed. "You're right," he said quietly. He took another bite. "It's perfect." He didn't look at her. He just kept eating. "Refill my water. And don't look so smug." Riley walked away, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She had won the round. But the war wasn't over. By the time the main course was cleared, the storm outside had intensified. Thunder rattled the large pane windows of Le Ciel. The restaurant was emptying out, but Taylor remained. Riley approached to crumb the table. As she swept the breadcrumbs away with a silver tool, her eyes fell on the leather notebook. It was open now. Taylor had stepped away to the restroom, leaving his sanctuary unguarded for the first time. Riley knew she shouldn't look, but the notebook was open to a page that wasn't full of business figures or real estate acquisitions. It was a sketch. It was a drawing, done in charcoal of a woman. She was young, laughing, sitting at this very table, table 4. The view of the Space Needle was sketched in the background, but the date at the bottom of the sketch was from 1984. Underneath the drawing, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Catherine's birthday." The night she said yes. Riley felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't a business dinner. This was a vigil. She heard footsteps and quickly straightened up. Taylor returned. He looked older now, the adrenaline of the confrontation having faded, leaving behind a weary, grey exhaustion. He sat down, and as he adjusted his napkin, his elbow knocked the empty wine glass. It tipped. It happened in slow motion. The glass fell, hit the edge of the bread plate, and shattered. Shards of crystal flew across the table. One large piece skidded across the notebook, tearing the page with the drawing. Taylor froze. He stared at the torn paper. The rip went right through the face of the woman in the sketch. "No!" he whispered. It was a sound of pure devastation. He scrambled to grab the notebook, his hands shaking violently. "No, no, no!" He wasn't the billionaire tyrant anymore. He was a panicked old man trying to save a piece of paper. In his haste, he sliced his finger on a shard of glass. Blood dripped onto the white tablecloth, blooming like a red flower. "Get away!" he shouted as Riley stepped forward. "Don't touch it! Mr. Taylor, you're bleeding!" Riley said, ignoring his shout. She didn't call Richard. She didn't call the busboy. She grabbed a clean linen napkin and reached for his hand. "I said, get away!" he snapped, pulling his hand back like a wounded animal. "Arthur, stop," Riley said. She used his first name. The shock of it made him pause. "Let me see your hand," she said gently, her voice dropping to the tone one uses with a frightened child. "The sketch is fine. The tear is clean. It can be taped. It can be restored. But you are bleeding on the tablecloth." Taylor looked at her, his eyes wide and wet. The mask had slipped completely. He let her take his hand. She wrapped the napkin around his finger, applying pressure. I drew that," he murmured, his voice trembling. 40 years ago. I'm not an artist. It's terrible. But it's the only one I have of her here." "It's beautiful," Riley said softly. "You captured her laugh. That's the hardest part to draw." Taylor looked up at her, really looked at her. "You know art?" "I have a degree in art history," Riley said with a sad smile. "Fat lot of good it's doing me waiting tables, but I know a gesture drawing when I see one. You loved her very much." Taylor slumped in his seat. The fight went out of him. "She died 5 years ago. Today is her birthday. We came here every year." Table 4. He looked around the empty, cold restaurant. "It used to be warmer here," he whispered. The lights were softer. The food was simpler. Now it's all foam and ego and noise. "Things change," Riley said. "They shouldn't," Taylor said bitterly. "Not the important things." He looked at the torn page again. "I'm a foolish old man, aren't I? Terrorizing waitresses because I'm lonely." "You're not foolish," Riley said, "but you are terrifying." Taylor actually let out a short, dry chuckle. "I suppose I am." He took a deep breath and straightened his tie. The mask was sliding back into place, but it was thinner now. "I want dessert," he announced, though the bite was gone from his tone. "The menu has a Valrhona chocolate soufflé or a lemon tart," Riley offered. Taylor shook his head. "No, I don't want those. I want what Catherine used to order. Every year. But I don't see it on the menu anymore." "What was it?" Riley asked. "Blackberry cobbler," Taylor said, "with vanilla bean ice cream. Not gelato, not sorbet. Ice cream." Riley's heart sank. This was a high-end French restaurant. They didn't do cobblers. They didn't have blackberries in the prep station. And Chef Jean-Luc would rather set himself on fire than serve a rustic American dessert. "Mr. Taylor," Riley began, "I don't think the kitchen—" Taylor looked at her. The grey eyes were pleading now. "Please, it's for her." Riley looked at the timer, which was sitting silent on the table. She looked at the blood-stained napkin. She looked at the torn sketch of the laughing woman. She knew the answer was no. She knew the kitchen didn't have the ingredients. She knew Richard would forbid it. "Give me 20 minutes, Riley said. Riley burst into the kitchen. "Chef, I need blackberries, flour, sugar, and butter. Now." Jean-Luc looked up from scrubbing down the station. "We are closed for orders. And we do not have blackberries. We have raspberries for the coulis. That is it." "We have to make a blackberry cobbler," Riley said, frantic. A cobbler? Jean-Luc laughed, a cruel barking sound. This is Le Ciel, not a truck stop in Alabama. No. Chef, please, Riley begged. It's for Taylor. It's his late wife's birthday. It's what they ate here 40 years ago. I don't care if it is the Queen of England's birthday, Jean-Luc shouted. I do not have blackberries. I cannot cook what I do not have. Riley stood there, defeated. She could feel the tears pricking her eyes. She had come so far. She had survived the wine, the duck, the explosion. To fail now on the memory of his wife. Then she remembered. The bartender, Mike, had been making a special cocktail earlier, a Seattle Storm. It used a blackberry puree and fresh blackberries for garnish. Riley ran to the bar. Mike was wiping down glasses. Mike, the garnish tray. Do you have blackberries? Mike looked startled. Yeah, maybe half a pint? Why? Give them to me. She grabbed the plastic container. It wasn't enough for a full cobbler, but it was enough for a ramekin. A single portion. She ran back to the kitchen. Jean-Luc blocked her path. Get out of my station. Chef, move, Riley growled. Jean-Luc blinked. The mouse had roared. I am going to make a biscuit dough, Riley said, tying her apron tighter. I need cold butter. I need heavy cream. You can fire me after tonight, Jean-Luc, but right now you are going to get out of my way or you are going to help me. Jean-Luc stared at her. He looked at the meager container of blackberries in her hand. He looked at the determination in her jaw. He let out a long, dramatic sigh. You will burn the butter, he muttered. He walked over to the fridge and pulled out a block of expensive French butter. Move over. If we are going to make this peasant slop, we will do it correctly. Riley smiled. Thank you, chef. They worked in tandem. It was a bizarre sight. The imperious French chef and the terrified new waitress, shoulder to shoulder. Riley smashed the blackberries with sugar and a squeeze of lemon. Jean-Luc rubbed the butter into the flour with his fingertips, creating a shaggy, perfect dough. They put the ramekin in the oven. 15 minutes. Riley paced outside the oven door. It needs ice cream, she realized. He said no gelato. We only have gelato, Jean-Luc said. Vanilla bean gelato. He'll know, Riley said. He's a shark. Then we cheat, Jean-Luc said with a wink. Add a splash of heavy cream to the gelato and refreeze it for 5 minutes in the blast chiller. It will coat the tongue like American ice cream. Riley looked at the chef. You're a genius. I know, Jean-Luc grunted. The timer on the oven beeped. Riley pulled the ramekin out. It was bubbling, purple juice oozing up around the golden brown crust. It smelled like summer. It smelled like home. She placed it on a serving plate. She added the scoop of the modified ice cream. She didn't dust it with powdered sugar. She didn't add a mint leaf. She kept it simple. She walked out to the dining room. The restaurant was empty now, save for table 4. The lights had been dimmed. The rain was still lashing the windows. Taylor was sitting with his head in his hands. He looked up as she approached. Riley placed the steaming ramekin in front of him. Blackberry cobbler, she whispered, with vanilla ice cream. Taylor stared at the dish. Steam curled up, carrying the scent of cooked fruit and butter. His eyes welled up instantly. He picked up his spoon. His hand was shaking again, but not from rage this time. He took a bite. He closed his eyes. A tear leaked out from under his eyelid and rolled down his cheek, tracing the deep lines of his face. It tastes like 1984, he whispered. He ate the whole thing in silence. He scraped the ramekin clean. When he was done, he folded his napkin and placed it on the table. He looked at Riley. The hardness was gone from his face. He just looked tired and sad and grateful. What is your name? He asked. I never asked. Riley, she said. Riley, Taylor repeated. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. Riley, do you like working here? Riley hesitated. I need the money. I'm an art historian. This is just survival. Taylor nodded. He uncapped a fountain pen. He wrote something on a check, tore it out, and placed it face down on the table. "This was the best service I have received in 20 years, Taylor said, because it was real. You didn't serve the millionaire. You served the man." He stood up. He picked up his notebook, careful with the torn page. "Good night, Riley." "Good night, Mr. Taylor." He walked out into the rain, alone. Riley stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. Then she reached for the check. She flipped it over. Her breath hitched in her throat. She had to grab the back of the chair to keep from falling. The check was made out to Riley Jenkins. The amount was $50,000, and in the memo line, written in that shaky, elegant script, were the words, "For the tuition. Go find your art." Riley covered her mouth to stifle a sob. It was more money than she had ever seen. It was freedom. But as she stared at the check, she realized something. The story wasn't over, because Arthur Taylor had left something else on the table. Under the check was a business card, not for his real estate firm, but for the Taylor Foundation for the Arts. And on the back, a phone number and a note. "Call me tomorrow. I have a gallery that needs a curator who isn't afraid to tell me the truth." Riley looked out the window at the rain-slicked city. The fear was gone. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was the girl who faced the dragon and found the human heart beating underneath. The silence in Le Sierre following Arthur Taylor's departure was heavier than the storm outside. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Riley stood by table 4, the check clutched in her hand, her knuckles white. The number, $50,000, seemed to burn through the paper. Richard, the manager, materialized from the shadows near the wine rack. He had been watching. He had seen the checkbook. He had seen the handshake. He walked over, his shoes clicking sharply on the hardwood. He didn't look at Riley's face. He looked exclusively at the slip of paper in her hand. "Well," Richard said, his voice dripping with a false, oily camaraderie, "it seems the gauntlet wasn't so bad after all. Good work, Riley. Team effort?" He reached out a hand. "I'll take that for the safe. We'll process it with the nightly deposit and calculate the tip pool percentages later." Riley pulled her hand back, pressing the check against her chest. "Excuse me?" Richard's smile faltered, replaced by a flash of annoyance. "The check, Riley. It's a gratuity. Per house policy, all gratuities over $500 are pooled and distributed by management. 10% for the bar, 15% for the kitchen, 25% for the house. Administrative fees." Riley looked at him. She saw the greed in his eyes. It was naked and ugly. He didn't care about the kitchen or the bar. He saw a payday. "The check is made out to me," Riley said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Riley Jenkins. It's not made out to Le Ciel, and the memo line says tuition. This isn't a tip, Richard. It's a gift." Richard's face hardened. He took a step closer, invading her personal space. "Don't be naive. You were wearing a Le Ciel uniform. You were serving Le Ciel food. That money belongs to the establishment. If you try to walk out of here with that, I'll call the police and report it as theft. I'll ruin you." "Theft?" Riley laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "He handed it to me." "He's an eccentric billionaire," Richard spat. "I could easily claim you manipulated him, or that he made a mistake. Give me the check, Riley. Don't make this ugly. You're a temp. You're nobody." Riley looked around. The restaurant was empty of customers, but the staff had gathered. Mike, the bartender, was drying a glass, watching. Beatrice was hugging a stack of menus. The buses were frozen. "Mike," Richard called out, not looking away from Riley. "Back me up here. Pool rules, right? You want your cut of 50 grand. Mike looked at Riley. He looked at the check. He remembered the fear in the room an hour ago, when Richard had tried to hide. "Actually, Richard," Mike said, his voice echoing in the large room, "I didn't serve table 4. I made a drink. Riley took the hit. If that money is hers, it's hers." Richard turned, his face turning a blotchy red. "Excuse me, you're fired." "You can't fire him," Beatrice said, stepping forward. And you can't have that check. We all heard what Taylor said. He said it was for her tuition. If you touch a dime of that girl's money, I'm walking. And I'm taking the dinner shift roster with me." "Mutiny?" Richard laughed nervously. "Over a waitress who's been here 3 weeks?" "She's not just a waitress," a deep voice boomed from the kitchen. The double doors swung open. Chef Jean-Luc marched out. He was still wearing his stained apron, and he was holding a heavy steel ladle like a mace. He walked past Richard and stood next to Riley. He was a foot shorter than the manager, but radiated 10 times the menace. "She is the only person in this building who understands food," Jean-Luc growled. "She defended my duck. She respected the ingredients. She made the cobbler. You, Richard? You would have served him the salt. You would have let him eat garbage just to get his money." Jean-Luc turned to Riley. "The money is yours, mademoiselle. If this vulture tries to take it, he will have to answer to me, and I have very sharp knives." Richard looked at the united front. The bartender, the veteran server, the head chef, and the new girl. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that his power had evaporated the moment Arthur Taylor walked out the door. He straightened his jacket, trying to salvage some dignity. "Fine, keep it. But don't bother coming back tomorrow. You're finished here, Riley." Riley looked at Richard. She looked at the check in her hand, the key to her future. Then she looked at her friends. "I wasn't planning on it," Riley said. She untied her apron. "I quit." She dropped the white apron on the floor at Richard's feet. "And Richard," she added, "the 82 Latour, it's corked. You might want to check the cellar before you try to sell it to the mayor." She turned and walked out the front door, into the rain, leaving the apron and the old life behind her. The storm that had battered Seattle the night before had vanished, leaving behind a sky of piercing, scrubbed-clean blue. The sunlight reflected off the wet pavement, turning the city into a glistening mirror, but Riley Jenkins didn't notice the view. She stood on the sidewalk in the Arts District, clutching the strap of her purse so tightly her fingers ached. Looming before her was the Taylor Foundation. It was an architectural marvel of glass and steel, sharp angles and intimidating heights, designed to make anyone standing at its base feel significantly smaller. Riley smoothed down the lapels of her thrifted blazer. She had spent an hour that morning trying to steam the wrinkles out of her best slacks, staring at herself in the bathroom mirror, repeating the number she had seen on the check, $50,000. It was real. The deposit slip in her pocket was proof. But as she stared at the brass intercom panel, the imposter syndrome that had plagued her since college roared back to life. "You are a waitress," it whispered. "You serve coffee. You wipe tables. You don't belong in a glass castle." She almost turned around. She almost walked back to the bus stop. But then she remembered the look on Richard's face when she dropped the apron. She remembered the taste of the blackberry cobbler. Riley took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp morning air, and pressed the buzzer. "Riley?" The voice came through the speaker instantly. It wasn't a secretary or a security guard. It was him. "Yes, Mr. Taylor, it's 9 a.m. The door is unlocked. Come up." She pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby was cavernous, a cathedral of silence that smelled of floor wax, old paper, and money. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the polished concrete floor, the sound echoing up towards the high ceiling. The space was filled with art, but it was a graveyard of creativity. Dozens of large canvases were draped in white dust sheets, standing like ghosts in the morning light. She found the spiral staircase and ascended. At the top, the mezzanine opened into a sprawling office that felt less like a workspace and more like a sanctuary. One entire wall was glass, overlooking the Space Needle. Arthur Taylor was waiting for her, but the shark in the bespoke suit was gone. In his place stood a man wearing a soft navy cashmere sweater and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked weary, but the jagged, terrifying edge he had carried at Le Ciel had been smoothed down. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply gestured to the room. "You're punctual," he observed, taking off his glasses. "I appreciate that. Most people who come here are late because they are too busy admiring the architecture downstairs." "It's a beautiful building," Riley said, stepping fully into the room. "It's a mausoleum," Taylor corrected her gently. "It's a storage unit for things I don't understand." He walked over to his desk, where the leather notebook from the night before sat closed. Next to it was a ceramic mug of coffee, steaming black, no saucer. "Did you go to the bank?" he asked. "I did," Riley replied. "The branch manager thought I was laundering money. He had to call your office to verify the check." Taylor chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "I imagine he did. People aren't used to generosity without strings attached." He moved away from the desk and walked toward a large easel in the corner, covered by a heavy linen sheet. "I told you last night that I have a gallery," Taylor said, his voice taking on a reflective tone. "That wasn't entirely true. I have a warehouse, a collection. My wife, Catherine, she didn't buy art for investment. She didn't buy the names that appear in Forbes. She had an eye for the forgotten." He rested his hand on the draped canvas. "She collected the artists who were rejected, the ones who were mocked by critics, the ones who were told they were too messy, too loud, too emotional." With a sudden, fluid motion, he pulled the sheet away. Riley stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. The painting was chaotic. It was a street scene, done in thick, violent strokes of oil paint. At first glance, it looked like a mess of grey and neon smudges. But as Riley squinted, stepping closer, the chaos resolved itself. The smudges became rain-slicked streets. The neon blurs became traffic lights, reflecting in puddles. And in the center, formed by the negative space of the darkness, were two figures holding hands. It was a masterpiece of perspective. "The critics called this amateur trash in 1990, Taylor said softly. "They said the artist didn't understand form. Catherine bought it for $500 because she said it felt like how a rainy day smells. Last week, an appraiser told me it's worth $2 million." He turned to look at Riley, his grey eyes searching her face. "I have 4,000 pieces like this in storage, and I have no idea what to do with them." Riley tore her eyes away from the canvas. "But you have a foundation. You have staff." "I have employees," Taylor corrected, his voice hardening slightly. "I went through 5 curators in the last year alone. Do you know why I fired them?" "Because they weren't qualified?" Riley guessed. "No, their resumes were impeccable. Harvard, Yale, the Sorbonne. I fired them because they were liars." Taylor began to pace, his agitation returning, though it was directed at the memory, not at her. "They told me what they thought I wanted to hear. If I looked at a painting and frowned, they said it was garbage. If I smiled, they said it was genius. They were sycophants. They were terrified of the billionaire. So they served me lies on a silver platter. They tried to sell me on trends and market value. They treated Catherine's collection like a stock portfolio." He stopped pacing and stood directly in front of Riley. "You, Riley, you told me the water was unsanitary when I ordered you to use your fingers. You told me the duck was perfect when I tried to gaslight you into taking it back. You risked your job, your rent, and your reputation to protect the integrity of a dish and the memory of a woman you never met." He extended a hand, palm up. "I don't need another expert. I can buy experts by the dozen. I need a truth-teller. I need someone who isn't afraid of me. I need someone who will fight for this art, the way you fought for Table 4. Riley looked at his hand, then back at the painting. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a mix of exhilaration and terror. "Mr. Taylor, I have a BA in art history. I've never run a gallery. I don't know the first thing about logistics or insurance or—" "You can learn logistics," Taylor interrupted firmly. "You can hire accountants for the insurance. What you have, integrity, cannot be taught." He walked back to his desk and picked up a folder. "The position is director of the Catherine Taylor Collection. The starting salary is $80,000 a year, with full benefits and a discretionary budget for acquisitions. Your job is simple. Go into the basement, find the art that makes you feel something, and put it on these walls. Tell the truth. $80,000. It was a number that didn't compute. It was stability. It was a future where she didn't have to count pennies at the grocery store. And, Taylor added, a small, genuine smile touching the corners of his eyes, you'll never have to serve coffee again. Riley felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away, standing up straighter. She wasn't the girl in the apron anymore. I'll take it, Riley said, her voice steady and clear. But I have one condition. Taylor raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You're negotiating already? Good. What is it? Riley pointed to the leather notebook on his desk. The sketch, the one of Catherine. We frame it. We put it in the lobby, right by the entrance. Taylor looked down at the notebook. He traced the leather cover with his thumb. It's not a masterpiece, Riley. It's a shaky drawing by a sentimental old man. The critics will laugh at it. Let them laugh, Riley said. It's honest. It's the reason this collection exists. It's the heart of the building. Taylor looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Done. 6 months later, the opening gala of the Taylor Gallery was the event of the season. The theme of the exhibition was simple, printed in bold black letters on the invitations, unapologetic. The mausoleum had come alive. The dust sheets were gone. The walls were vibrant with color, showcasing works that had been hidden in the dark for decades. The air buzzed with the chatter of the city's elite, politicians, investors, artists, and critics, all drinking champagne and marveling at the collection. Riley stood near the back of the room. She wore a simple, elegant black dress that fit perfectly, her hair pinned back. She watched the crowd, not with fear, but with the calm eye of a curator. Arthur Taylor approached her, weaving through the crowd. He looked younger than he had in years, energized by the noise and the life in the room. He held 2 flutes of vintage champagne. To table 4, he said, handing her a glass. To the cobbler, Riley replied with a smile, clinking her glass against his. The reviews are already coming in online, Taylor noted, looking around the room. They're calling the curation bold and revelatory. You were right about the sketch in the lobby. People are stopping there first. Some are crying. It's a good story, Riley said. People love a true story. As she took a sip of champagne, her gaze drifted towards the entrance. There was a commotion at the velvet rope. Standing there, trying to talk his way past security, was Richard. The manager of Lessier looked smaller than she remembered. His suit looked cheap under the gallery lights, his hair thinning. He was craning his neck, desperate to be seen, desperate to be part of the inner circle. He looked across the room and locked eyes with Riley. For a moment, time froze. Richard's jaw went slack. He saw the waitress he had tried to bully, the girl he had fired. But she wasn't serving drinks. She was standing next to the billionaire, holding a crystal flute, the master of the house. He looked at her with a mixture of envy and regret, so potent it was almost palpable. He took a half-step forward, perhaps to wave, perhaps to try and claim some credit for her success. Riley didn't scowl. She didn't glare. She didn't give him the satisfaction of anger. She simply held his gaze for 1 second, raised her glass in a polite, silent toast, a final goodbye to the life she had left behind, and then turned her back on him. "Is everything all right?" Taylor asked, noticing the interaction. Riley looked at the painting of the rain-slicked street, then back at her friend. "Yes," Riley said, her voice full of warmth. "Everything is perfect." She had faced the dragon. She had walked through the fire, and she had come out the other side, not just with the gold, but with her soul intact. And that, she realized, was the only masterpiece that really mattered. And that is the story of Riley and the Billionaire. It's a reminder that true value isn't found in a bank account or a fancy suit. It's found in integrity. Riley could have taken the easy way out. She could have lied about the duck. She could have run from the table. She could have let the manager steal her moment. But she didn't. She realized that even when you are serving the most powerful person in the room, your dignity is the one thing they can't buy unless you sell it. What would you have done? Would you have eaten the duck? Would you have stood up to Richard? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about the underdogs who fight back and win. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.